Most people live their entire lives without realizing this one thing. And what's scary is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Successful people don't wake up smarter. They don't get handed secret opportunities. But early in life, they notice something subtle, something most people miss while they're busy chasing motivation, comfort, or approval. It's not taught in school. It's not discussed openly. And the people who understand it rarely explain it clearly because it sounds too simple. But this realization quietly shapes how they think about time, effort, pain, and growth. It changes how they react when life gets hard. It changes what they say yes to, and more importantly, what they say no to. Most people only realize this in their 40s or 50s. By then, the cost is already paid. If you're listening to this now, you're early. And that matters more than talent ever will. Stay with this audiobook because what you're about to hear isn't motivation, it's perspective. If this already feels different like the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who's still searching for answers. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The clock is always running. Most people live like time is an unlimited resource. Successful people realize early that the clock is always running, whether you pay attention to it or not. They don't wait for permission to begin. They don't wait for a perfect Monday, a new year, a better mood, or the right set of circumstances. They start with what they have, where they are, and they build from there because they understand something brutally simple. Your life is being spent in real time. I remember a guy I met in a small coffee shop outside Columbus, Ohio. Mid-30s, plain hoodie, calm voice, the kind of person you wouldn't notice until you did. He had built a logistics business from scratch, no family money, no fancy connections. What struck me wasn't his success story. It was his relationship with time. He treated minutes like most people treat $100 bills. Not anxiously, not desperately, just respectfully. When his phone buzzed, he didn't jump. When someone tried to drag him into gossip, he didn't bite. When a new idea showed up, he wrote it down, scheduled it, and moved on. He didn't feel productive. He was productive. And he didn't brag about working late. He protected his mornings like they were sacred. He told me about his first job after high school, loading trucks at a warehouse. He watched the older guys complain every day. Same complaints, same jokes, same bitterness. They talked about getting out like it was a dream they'd pursue later. He realized something that made him feel sick. Later is a lie you tell yourself so you can avoid the discomfort of action. Later is where ambitions go to die quietly. He decided right there that he would not be the person who wakes up at 45 and realizes he spent 20 years rehearsing excuses. So he made a simple decision. He would treat every year like it mattered. Not every day, not every moment, because that's too heavy for most people to carry, but every year. He asked one question at the start of each year. What will be undeniably better by December 31st because I chose discipline over comfort? One skill, one habit, one relationship, one business move, one health change. He didn't try to transform his entire identity in a month. He tried to keep a promise to his future self. That's what successful people realize early. They stop negotiating with time. They stop acting like time owes them. Time doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care how much potential you have. It doesn't care what you meant to do. It only responds to what you actually do consistently while everyone else is distracted. Think about how most people spend a typical week in America. The days blur together. They wake up and immediately check their phone, letting the world set their emotional temperature. They rush through work, tell themselves they'll start taking care of their health when things calm down, and they collapse at night into entertainment that numbs them just enough to forget they're unhappy. Then Sunday hits, and that sinking feeling shows up. Where did the week go? It went exactly where you sent it. Successful people don't have more time, they just have fewer illusions. They don't confuse movement with progress. They don't confuse busyness with value. They don't confuse planning with execution. They understand that your calendar is a mirror. It reflects what you truly worship: comfort, approval, distraction, or growth. One of those always wins. There's a metaphor I want you to hold on to. Imagine your life is a road trip across the country. You can start in Boston, Miami, Dallas, Seattle. It doesn't matter. The question is not where you start. The question is whether you're driving with intention. If you don't set a destination, you'll still burn gas. You'll still wear out tires. You'll still lose hours. You'll just arrive nowhere and call it fate. A lot of people fear commitment because it feels like closing doors. Successful people commit because it opens momentum. They pick a direction and start walking. And here's the secret. You don't find your path by thinking harder. You find your path by moving and paying attention to what grows inside you as you do. You discover your values by seeing what you refuse to sacrifice. You discover your strengths by doing hard things long enough to stop performing and start becoming. That logistics owner didn't have some magical gift. What he had was a willingness to do the boring work consistently. When he didn't know something, he learned it. When he was afraid, he acted anyway. When he messed up, he fixed it quickly. When he won, he didn't get drunk on the victory. He just reset the standard. This is where most people get it twisted. They think success is a dramatic transformation, a viral moment, a lucky break. Those things can happen, sure. But if your foundations are weak, the lucky break becomes a curse because it exposes you. Successful people realize early that the real game is compound growth. Small actions repeated become a force you can't recognize from the outside until it's too late to catch up. Picture two people graduating from the same high school in the same town. One starts reading 10 pages a day. 10 pages. That's it. The other scrolls 10 minutes more each night and says it's harmless. Fast forward 5 years. The first person has read hundreds of books, learned how to think, gained vocabulary, gained perspective, gained tools, and probably gained opportunities because they can communicate and solve problems better. The second person has consumed thousands of hours of noise. Both people were just living, but one was investing and one was spending. That's the difference. Success isn't built in big speeches. It's built in quiet choices. If you're listening to this and you feel behind, good. That feeling can become fuel if you stop using it as a weapon against yourself. You don't need regret. You need urgency. Regret points backward. Urgency points forward. Regret says, I missed my chance. Urgency says, I'm not missing another day. Now, urgency doesn't mean panic. It means clarity. It means you stop pretending that you have endless retries. It means you respect your future enough to act like today matters. Successful people realize early that the future doesn't reward the person who wants it. The future rewards the person who builds it, one disciplined day at a time. Here's a real-world example you've seen, even if you didn't notice it. Think about people who get in shape and stay in shape, not for a summer, but for years. They don't rely on motivation. Motivation is a mood. It's unstable. They rely on identity and systems. They know what they do on average is what they become. They don't ask, "Do I feel like working out today?" They ask, "What does a disciplined person do today?" Then they do it, even if it's lighter than usual, even if it's imperfect. They keep the chain unbroken. They protect their self-respect. That's a key realization. Self-respect is a renewable resource, but only if you keep your promises to yourself. Every time you say you'll do something and you don't, you teach your brain that your word doesn't matter. And then you wonder why you don't trust yourself. Successful people realize early that confidence isn't something you wait to feel. It's something you earn by doing what you said you would do, especially when no one is watching. The world will always offer you an easier option. It will always offer you an excuse that sounds reasonable. It will always offer you a distraction disguised as a reward. The question is whether you can tell the difference between rest and escape. Rest restores you for the mission. Escape avoids the mission. Rest has a purpose. Escape is a habit that grows teeth. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. So what do you do with this realization that the clock is always running? You don't need a complicated plan. You need a few decisive moves that change your trajectory. First, choose one area of your life to treat like a priority for the next 90 days. Not 10 areas. 1. Your health, your career skill, your finances, your relationships, your mindset. Pick the one that would make everything else easier if it improved. Then simplify your actions into daily commitments so small you can't pretend they're impossible. 20 minutes of focused learning. A workout you can complete even on a bad day. A daily savings transfer. A hard conversation you've been avoiding. A nightly plan for tomorrow. The goal isn't to impress yourself. The goal is to become consistent. Second, create an environment that supports the person you're trying to become. In America, convenience is everywhere. Drive-through everything. One-click everything. Entertainment on demand. That's not inherently bad, but it can quietly train you to expect comfort as the default. So you have to design friction on purpose. Put the phone in another room when you work. Delete the apps that steal your attention. Stock your kitchen like you respect your body. Set your running shoes where you'll trip over them. Successful people don't rely on willpower as their only defense. They design their life like an athlete designs training. Third, start measuring time in outcomes, not hours. You can work 10 hours and achieve nothing if you spend it reacting. You can work 2 focused hours and move your life forward if you spend it building. Ask yourself each morning, what one outcome, if completed today, will make me proud tonight? Then protect that time like it's an appointment with your future. And here's the part that separates listeners from doers. You must learn to tolerate the early stage of anything. The stage where you're bad at it. The stage where no one applauds. The stage where it feels like nothing is happening. That stage is where most people quit because they interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. Successful people interpret discomfort as a signal that growth is happening. Imagine planting a seed in a backyard garden. You don't dig it up every day to check if it's working. You water it, you protect it, you wait, you trust the process, and you stay consistent long enough for roots to form. Your habits are the same. You won't see the roots at first, but they're forming. And once they do, your life changes faster than you thought possible. Now let's bring this back to you right now in your real life. You have responsibilities, bills, family, stress. That's real. This isn't about pretending you can drop everything and chase a dream. This is about refusing to waste the hours you do control. It's about choosing a higher standard for your attention. It's about making your life a project, not a performance. When you look back on the next year, you're going to see either a story of drift or a story of direction. Drift is easy. Direction is earned. Drift happens by default. Direction happens by decision. So ask yourself, without being dramatic, without being harsh, just honest, where is your time going right now? What are you feeding daily that is growing into your future? What are you consuming that is quietly consuming you? What is the one commitment you could make today that would change your self-respect by tonight? And if the clock is always running, what would it look like to start treating your days like they actually matter? Chapter 2. Ownership changes everything. Last chapter, you confronted the truth that the clock is always running and your calendar is a mirror. You heard how small choices compound, how systems beat motivation, and how self-respect grows when you keep promises to yourself. That wasn't theory. That was a wake-up call. Now we take the next step, because time only becomes powerful when you take full ownership of what you do with it. Successful people realize early that no one is coming to save them. Not their boss, not their parents, not the government, not a partner, not a lucky break. They can accept help, they can learn from mentors, they can be supported by community, but they don't outsource responsibility for their life. They don't sit around waiting for the world to become fair. They decide to become effective. Ownership is not a slogan, it's a posture. It's the difference between saying, "This happened to me," and saying, "This is mine to handle." One keeps you small. The other makes you dangerous in the best way. When you own your outcomes, you stop wasting energy on blame and you start using that same energy to build solutions. I want you to picture a football team down by 10 points at halftime. Some players point fingers. They complain about the refs. They blame the weather, the turf, the play calls, the noise in the stadium. That team loses almost every time. But the teams that come back have a different conversation in the locker room. It's blunt. It's uncomfortable. It sounds like, "We're getting beat at the line, we're missing tackles, we're not executing, fix it." That's ownership. And it works because it turns emotion into action. I once watched ownership change a man's life in a way that still sticks with me. He was a union electrician in the Midwest, good worker, reliable, the kind of guy everyone likes. Then the company hit a rough patch, layoffs came, and he got cut. For months he talked like a victim of the economy. Every conversation led back to how unfair it was, how he'd done everything right, how people above him had messed up. He wasn't wrong about the facts, but he was wrong about the strategy. One night, a friend of his invited him to help on a side job rewiring a small restaurant. Just a few hours. He didn't want to go. He was bitter, tired, and embarrassed. But he went, and while they worked, the owner of the restaurant started talking about how hard it was to find dependable contractors. Something clicked. The electrician realized he had been waiting for a company to choose him again when he could choose himself. The next week he registered a small LLC, nothing fancy. He made a basic website, asked for referrals, and started showing up early. He didn't suddenly become a different person. He just moved from "someone should hire me" to "I'm going to serve customers." That shift took him from powerless to powerful. Ownership doesn't mean you caused everything that happened to you. It means you take responsibility for what happens next. That is a major difference, and successful people learn it early because they can't afford the alternative. Victim thinking is expensive. It costs time, it costs clarity, it costs momentum, and it drains relationships. Ownership is cheaper and it pays dividends. Here, that's how you can tell which mindset you're living in. When something goes wrong, do you immediately search for the guilty party, or do you immediately search for the next move? One keeps your ego comfortable. The other makes your life better. In the United States, we're surrounded by a culture that tries to sell you shortcuts and excuses at the same time. If you're struggling financially, you'll see ads promising overnight success. If you're struggling emotionally, you'll see content telling you nothing is your fault and you shouldn't have to change. If you're struggling physically, you'll see a pill, a powder, a hack, a new plan you'll abandon in 2 weeks. Successful people don't fall for it because they understand a brutal truth. The solution is usually boring. It's consistent ownership. It's showing up. It's doing what you said you would do. It's not glamorous. It's effective. Now, ownership is not just about your actions. It's about your standards. The person who wins long term isn't the one who has perfect weeks. It's the one who refuses to let a bad day become a bad identity. They don't say, "I failed, so I'm done." They say, "I slipped, so I'm adjusting." They don't turn a mistake into a story about who they are. They turn it into data. Think about it like driving. If you take a wrong exit on the highway, you don't pull over and scream at the GPS for 3 hours. You reroute. You keep moving. You correct course. That's ownership in real time. And the faster you reroute, the less distance you lose. Here, that's what this looks like in the real world. If you're underpaid, ownership sounds like learning a skill the market pays for and proving you can deliver. It sounds like building a portfolio, collecting results, networking with intention, asking for responsibility, and then asking for compensation. It doesn't sound like complaining about your boss while doing the bare minimum. That's not rebellion. That's self-sabotage. If your health is slipping, ownership sounds like changing your environment and your routines, not just your intentions. It sounds like sleep, movement, real food, and consistency. It doesn't sound like waiting for inspiration. Your body doesn't care about your inspiration. It responds to your habits. If your relationships are strained, ownership sounds like communication and boundaries. It sounds like saying what you mean without attacking. It sounds like doing your part consistently and being honest about what you will and will not tolerate. It doesn't sound like keeping score in silence and exploding later. Ownership also means owning your attention. You can't claim you want a better life while feeding your mind a diet of negativity, outrage, and distraction. Successful people learn early that attention is a currency. Whatever you consistently pay attention to grows. If you pay attention to drama, you grow drama. If you pay attention to excuses, you grow excuses. If you pay attention to learning, building, and executing, you grow capability. There's another story that captures this perfectly. A woman in Atlanta I spoke with built a real estate career in her late 20s. She wasn't born into money. She started with a small apartment and a used car. She told me the hardest part wasn't cold calls or showings or contracts. The hardest part was protecting her mind. In her first year, she got rejected constantly. People ignored her. Some talked down to her. A few were outright rude. She said she realized she had 2 choices: take it personally and spiral, or treat it like training and get stronger. She chose training, so she built a routine. Every morning before she opened her phone, she reviewed her goals and her daily plan. She practiced scripts out loud. She studied negotiation. She tracked her numbers like an athlete tracks reps. She treated rejection as a normal cost of business, not a verdict on her worth. That is ownership. It's not loud. It's steady. It's disciplined. Now I'm going to make this direct, because that's what you need if you're serious. Ownership requires you to stop lying to yourself in small ways. It requires you to stop calling a lack of priority a lack of time. It requires you to stop calling fear being realistic. It requires you to stop calling comfort self-care when it's really avoidance. Real self-care is building a life you don't need to escape from. Real self-care is going to bed when your friends are still scrolling. Real self-care is telling the truth in a relationship. Real self-care is doing the work your future depends on. Ownership is self-care for your entire life. So how do you practice ownership without getting overwhelmed? Start with language. Your words shape your actions. Listen to yourself for one day. Catch how often you say, "I can't," when you mean, "I won't." Catch how often you say, "They won't let me," when you mean, "I haven't tried a different approach." Catch how often you say, "I don't have time," when you mean, "It's not a priority." Replace those phrases with ownership statements. I'm choosing not to. I haven't made it a priority yet. I'm responsible for finding a way. That alone changes your posture. Then move to commitments. Pick one promise to yourself that you will keep every day for the next 30 days. Make it small enough to be non-negotiable. 10 minutes of reading. A 20-minute walk. Writing a plan for tomorrow before bed. Saving a fixed amount. Practicing a skill. The point is not the size. The point is that you become the kind of person who follows through. Every day you keep that promise, you're not just completing a task. You're casting a vote for a new identity. Next, own your boundaries. Successful people realize early that saying yes to everything is saying no to their future. If you say yes to late-night distractions, you say no to early morning momentum. If you say yes to every request, you say no to deep work. If you say yes to people who drain you, you say no to your own stability. Ownership means you decide what your life is for and you defend it. And when you fail, because you will sometimes fail, ownership means you don't make it dramatic. You don't make it moral. You don't turn it into shame. You treat it like a coach treats game film. What happened? Why did it happen? What will I change? Then you move fast, because here's the payoff. When you live in ownership, you become calm under pressure. You become reliable. You become someone others can count on. You become someone who can be trusted with bigger opportunities. And even when no one is watching, you know who you are. That internal stability is rare and it's worth everything. So as you move through your day, keep this in your mind. The world rewards the person who can handle their own life. Not perfectly, consistently. Responsibility is heavy, yes, but it's also freeing because it puts your hands back on the steering wheel. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Now let it land. Where have you been giving away your power by blaming circumstances you can't control? Where have you been waiting for permission instead of choosing yourself? What promise could you make tonight that would rebuild your self-trust by tomorrow morning? And if you decided right now to own your attention, your habits, your standards, and your next move, what kind of life would you start building immediately? Chapter 3. The long game is the game so far. You face two realities that most people avoid. First, the clock is always running and your days become your destiny. Then you stepped into ownership, where your power returns the moment you stop blaming and start handling. Now you're ready for the third realization that separates the people who dabble from the people who build. The long game is the game, and shortcuts are usually traps. Successful people realize early that the life they want is built through patience with pressure. They understand that results come after repetition, not after motivation. Most people are addicted to quick wins because quick wins feel good right now. But quick wins have a hidden cost. They train your brain to demand a reward before you've earned it. And the moment you need endurance, you collapse. Look around at American culture and you'll see how constant the temptation is. Fast food in 5 minutes, entertainment in 2 seconds, shipping in 1 day, credit cards that let you pretend you can afford a life you haven't built, social media highlights that make you feel behind even when you're working hard. The entire system is designed to keep you consuming, reacting, and numbing. Successful people don't just resist it. They see it for what it is, a machine that profits when you can't delay gratification. I want to give you a picture that makes this simple. Imagine 2 people get a paycheck on the same Friday. One person uses it to impress people who don't pay their bills. New clothes, new gadgets, dinner that costs more than it should, a weekend that disappears. The other person uses it to increase their future options. They pay down debt. They build an emergency fund. They invest in a skill. They put money into a simple long-term plan. No fireworks, no applause, but 10 years later one person has memories and stress and the other has choices. Both were living. One was building. This long-game mindset shows up everywhere. In fitness, it's the difference between crash dieting and training. Crash dieting is short-term punishment. Training is long-term identity. The person who plays the long game lifts, walks, eats like an adult, sleeps and repeats. They don't chase a body. They build a body. They accept that progress is slow at first, and they don't panic when the scale stalls because they're building a system that lasts. In career, it's the difference between chasing titles and building leverage. The long-game person is obsessed with becoming valuable. They build skills that travel with them. They learn how to communicate, how to solve problems, how to manage projects, how to sell ideas, how to lead themselves. They don't just want a job. They want capability. And capability creates options. In relationships, it's the difference between chemistry and character. The long-game person cares about trust. They care about how someone handles conflict, how someone handles stress, how someone speaks when they're angry, how someone treats people who can't do anything for them. They don't choose partners based on sparks alone. They choose based on stability and alignment because they understand that the future is made of ordinary Tuesdays, not dramatic weekends. Here's a story that captures the long game in a way you can feel. A kid in Phoenix worked at a grocery store after school, stocking shelves, bagging groceries, cleaning up messes. He wasn't the loud kid. He wasn't the future entrepreneur who announced his dreams. He was quiet and serious, but he had a habit. Every time a customer paid with a card, he watched how they carried themselves. Not in a creepy way, in a curious way. He noticed who was calm, who was impatient, who treated cashiers like humans, who treated them like furniture. He started asking questions. He learned that the store manager had started as a bagger too. He learned that one customer owned a small landscaping company. He learned that another customer had worked for the city for 30 years and had a pension because he stuck with a plan. What did he do with that? He didn't complain about the job. He used it. He learned how businesses work. He learned how inventory works. He learned how to show up on time even when he didn't feel like it. He saved money even when his friends spent theirs. Then he used that money to take a certification course in a trade that paid well. He wasn't chasing excitement. He was chasing stability. By his mid-20s, he wasn't flashy, but he had something rare, a foundation. He had no consumer debt, a growing skill set, and a reputation for reliability. People started offering him opportunities because he looked like someone who could handle them. That's the long game. It's not glamorous, but it's powerful, and it's available to you. Now let's get specific about what successful people realize early, because this is where your life either changes or it stays the same with better intentions. They realize that discipline is a form of freedom. When you can delay gratification, you can choose your future. When you can't, you're trapped in the present. That's why so many people feel stuck. They keep choosing what feels good now, then they act surprised when they don't like where they end up. The future is a receipt. It reflects your purchases. They also realize that boredom is not an emergency. The early stage of building anything is repetitive. Learning a skill is repetitive. Building a body is repetitive. Building savings is repetitive. Building trust is repetitive. Most people can't handle repetition without novelty, so they quit. The long-game person understands that repetition is the training ground of mastery, and they realize that small sacrifices are cheaper than big consequences. It's cheaper to wake up early than to wake up broke. It's cheaper to eat clean most days than to pay for chronic health problems later. It's cheaper to learn communication than to pay for divorce. It's cheaper to study than to be stuck in a job you hate for decades. The long game isn't about suffering. It's about choosing which pain you want. The pain of discipline is temporary. The pain of regret is long-term. So how do you actually live this without turning into a robot? You start by making the future real. Most people don't delay gratification because their future feels abstract. It's like a foggy image they talk about but don't feel. Successful people make it concrete. They picture their future in detail, then they act like someone is depending on them because someone is. It's you. A practical way to do this is to create a simple standard for your money, your time, and your energy. With money, the long game means you stop financing your ego. You stop spending to soothe emotions. You stop calling debt normal just because it's common. You build a buffer so a flat tire or a medical bill doesn't wreck your life. You live below your means so you can invest in your means. You treat your financial choices like a vote for your freedom. With time, the long game means you stop fragmenting your attention. You don't need to do everything. You need to do the right things consistently. You protect focused time for learning, building, and health. You schedule the work that moves your life, not just the work that maintains it. You don't wait for big blocks of free time that never come. You use the time you do have with intention. With energy, the long game means you stop creating chaos in your own life. You stop staying up late just to feel like you had time to yourself. You stop skipping basics and then wondering why your mood is unstable. You do the boring things that keep you strong: sleep, movement, real food, honest conversations, steady routines. You don't need perfection. You need stability. There's a mental shift that makes this easier. You have to stop seeing delayed gratification as deprivation. It's not deprivation, it's trade. You're trading a small pleasure now for a bigger payoff later. That's not punishment, that's strategy. Imagine you're training for a marathon. You don't quit because training is uncomfortable. You accept discomfort as the entry fee. You don't call it missing out when you skip late-night junk food. You call it staying committed. Your language matters because it frames your identity. If you keep telling yourself you're depriving yourself, you'll resent the process. If you tell yourself you're investing, you'll respect the process. And here's the twist. Once you live like this, you start enjoying it. Not because it becomes easy, but because it becomes meaningful. You feel proud, you feel capable, you feel grounded. You start waking up with a quiet confidence because you know you're building something real. Now let's address the biggest objection people have. They'll say, "But what if I work hard and it doesn't pay off?" That's fear talking, and fear loves uncertainty. Here's the truth. Nothing is guaranteed. But the long game isn't about certainty. It's about odds. You increase your odds by doing what works repeatedly. You increase your odds by becoming valuable, healthy, disciplined, and trustworthy. You increase your odds by stacking small wins. You can't control every outcome, but you can control whether you become the kind of person who wins more often than not. And successful people understand another key detail. Momentum is fragile. If you keep restarting, you stay a beginner forever. That's why the long game person protects consistency like it's sacred. They don't let a bad week become a lost year. They don't throw away progress because they slipped. They reset fast. They recommit fast. They keep moving. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. So here's what you do next, starting today. You pick one long game commitment that makes your future stronger, and you treat it like a contract, not a wish. A contract. You stop asking whether you feel like it, and you start asking whether you respect your future enough to do it anyway. You let the average of your days shape you into someone you can be proud of. And as you sit with that, let these questions run through you, not as trivia, but as a mirror. Where in your life have you been chasing quick relief instead of long-term strength? What are you currently buying with your time and attention, and is the return worth it? If you kept living the way you've been living for the next 5 years, where would it take you? And what would change immediately if you chose, starting now, to play the long game on purpose? Chapter 4. Your circle builds your ceiling. You've already faced the truth that time is being spent whether you respect it or not, and you've taken ownership instead of handing your power to blame. You've also committed to the long game, where discipline and patience build outcomes that shortcuts never can. Now it's time to look at what quietly shapes your behavior when you're not even thinking about it. Because even the most driven person will drift if the people and environments around them keep pulling them off course. Successful people realize early that their life will rise or fall to the level of their standards, and their standards are heavily influenced by their circle. Not in a shallow, judgmental way, in a practical, unavoidable way. If the people closest to you normalize complaining, laziness, and distraction, you will have to fight uphill to stay focused. If the people closest to you normalize growth, honesty, and effort, your discipline becomes easier to maintain because it's reinforced instead of attacked. Most people underestimate social gravity. They think they're immune. They think they can hang around negativity and stay positive, hang around low ambition and stay ambitious, hang around chaos and stay calm. That's a fantasy. Humans are wired to adapt. You pick up language, habits, expectations, and excuses without noticing. And then one day you wake up and realize your life looks a lot like the conversations you've been having. There's a reason some people leave their hometown and come back transformed. It's not always the new city. It's the new norms. It's the new expectation that you show up prepared. It's being around people who don't clap for you doing the bare minimum. It's hearing someone say casually, "Of course I work out. Of course I save. Of course I read. Of course I follow through." When you hear that enough, it stops sounding extreme. It starts sounding normal, and what becomes normal becomes easy to repeat. I want to tell you about a guy in Nashville who worked in a busy restaurant downtown. Long shifts, late nights, good money some weeks, rough money other weeks. He was sharp, funny, and he had potential, but he was stuck. After every shift, the crew would end up at the same bar. Same routine. Drinks, complaining about customers, complaining about managers, laughing at the idea of real goals. He told himself it was harmless. He deserved to unwind. And once in a while, sure, unwind is fine, but it wasn't once in a while, it was his default. Then one night, a regular customer came in late, ordered food to go, and waited at the counter. The customer was polite, calm, and he looked tired in a focused way. Not drained, not messy, focused. They started talking. The customer asked the waiter what he wanted to do long term. The waiter gave the usual answer, something vague about starting a business someday. The customer nodded and said, almost casually, that someday is a rough neighborhood. Everything that gets lost ends up there. That line hit him because it wasn't an insult. It was a mirror. He realized his circle was making someday feel comfortable. He realized he was spending his best energy with people who were allergic to growth because growth would force them to face their own choices. So he made a decision that felt socially expensive. He stopped going out after shifts. Not forever, just for a season. He started waking up earlier. He started using an hour each day to learn a skill that could move him out of the restaurant industry if he wanted. And here's what happened immediately. Some people mocked him. Some people tried to pull him back. Some people got quiet like his discipline offended them. That is exactly when you find out who is really in your corner. Successful people learn early that support is not always loud. Sometimes support looks like someone respecting your boundary. Sometimes support looks like someone not teasing you for taking yourself seriously. Sometimes support looks like someone asking, "How can I help?" instead of asking, "Why are you acting different?" Here's the part most people avoid because it requires courage. You don't just choose your habits. You choose the friction around your habits. If every time you try to improve, you have to fight your social environment, you will eventually get tired. So successful people make a strategic move. They curate proximity. They spend time with people who make the right things easier and the wrong things harder. This does not mean you abandon everyone who isn't on your level. It means you stop letting people who refuse to grow be the loudest voices in your life. It means you stop treating loyalty like self-sacrifice. Loyalty is not letting someone keep you small so they can stay comfortable. Think about it like this. If you put a healthy apple in a bag with rotten apples, the healthy apple doesn't cleanse the bag. The rot spreads. That's not pessimism. That's biology. Your environment will win unless you intervene. And environment is more than people. It's what you see when you wake up, what you reach for when you're bored, what your phone serves you when your attention is soft. Successful people realize early that the world is always trying to program them. Ads, algorithms, news cycles, group chats, endless opinions. If you don't choose your inputs will choose your outputs. So they become ruthless about their inputs. They don't call it being rigid. They call it being serious. There's a woman in Milwaukee who went back to school while working full-time. She had kids. She had bills, she was exhausted. The people around her loved her, but they didn't understand what she was doing. They kept inviting her out, kept asking her to do favors, kept pulling on her time. At first she tried to do everything and study at night. It didn't work. Her grades slipped, her patience slipped, and she started doubting herself. Then she did something simple and powerful. She told her family and friends the truth. She said, "For the next year, my availability is changing. Not because I don't love you, but because I love my future and my kids too." She set specific hours to study. She turned off notifications. She made a quiet corner in her home where her brain could focus. And every time she wanted to quit, she reminded herself that she wasn't just chasing a degree. She was building options. That's what successful people do. They stop trying to win with motivation. They win with structure. Now let's make this practical in your life. First, audit your circle without guilt, not with cruelty, with honesty. After you spend time with someone, do you feel stronger or weaker, clearer or foggier, more disciplined or more impulsive, more hopeful or more cynical? Your body knows. Your mood is information. Pay attention. Second, build a small, standard circle, even if it's only 2 people. People who keep their word. People who challenge you respectfully. People who are building something. If you don't have that in your immediate life, create it. Join a class. Join a local group. Find a community tied to a skill or a goal. In America, there are people everywhere who want to level up, but you won't meet them in the same places you go to waste time. Third, protect your focus like it's your future, because it is. That means setting boundaries that may disappoint people. Disappointment is not danger. Their discomfort is not your emergency. If someone gets angry because you're taking your life seriously, that tells you something important. Not about them being evil, but about your growth threatening the role they're used to you playing. Fourth, learn to be alone without feeling lonely. This is a major advantage. People who cannot be alone will always make decisions based on approval. They'll stay in unhealthy relationships. They'll stay in unhealthy routines. They'll stay in unhealthy crowds. Successful people learn early that solitude is where you hear yourself. Solitude is where your standards are built. Solitude is where you plan, reflect, and reset. And there's another layer to this. You have to become the kind of person you want to be around. It's easy to demand better from others. It's harder to become better yourself. If you want friends who are disciplined, become disciplined. If you want partners who communicate, learn to communicate. If you want a circle that is honest, be honest. Your life attracts what you tolerate, but it also attracts what you embody. One more metaphor to lock this in. Your circle is like the lane lines on a highway at night. They don't drive the car for you, but they keep you from drifting into a ditch when you're tired. The right people keep you steady. The wrong people make drifting feel normal. You don't need a huge group. You need the right influence. Sometimes the most powerful circle is a small one where standards are high and excuses don't survive. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. So here's what I want you to consider as you move forward. Who in your life pulls you toward the person you're trying to become, and who pulls you back toward the person you're trying to outgrow? What conversations do you keep having that lead nowhere, and what conversations would change your life if you had them more often? Where do you need a boundary that protects your time, your focus, and your standards? And if you chose, starting today, to build your circle with intention instead of habit, what would become possible for you over the next year? Chapter 5. Become so valuable you can't be ignored. You've already faced the truth that time doesn't slow down for anyone, and you've taken back control through ownership instead of blame. You committed to the long game, where patience and repetition beat shortcuts, and you confronted the power of your circle, the quiet influence that either sharpens you or softens you. Now it's time to lock in a realization that turns potential into income, confidence, and freedom. Successful people realize early that security isn't a place you arrive at, it's a person you become, and that person is built through skill. A lot of Americans chase stability by chasing a perfect job, a perfect boss, a perfect company, a perfect situation. Then layoffs happen, the economy shifts, a new manager shows up, technology changes the work, and suddenly the stable plan isn't stable. Successful people see this early and make a different bet. They don't bet on the company. They bet on themselves. They build portable value. Here's what that means in plain terms. You are rewarded for the problems you can solve and the trust you can earn. If you can solve bigger problems, you get paid more. If you can solve problems faster, you get paid more. If you can solve problems that are rare and painful, you get paid a lot more. If you can do that while being reliable, easy to work with, and clear in your communication, you become hard to replace. Most people never connect those dots because they spend their energy looking for appreciation instead of building capability. They want recognition for effort, but the world rewards results. The world doesn't owe you applause for showing up. It rewards you when your presence creates value. I want to give you a real picture of how this plays out. A guy in San Antonio came home after serving in the military and took the first job he could get. Warehouse work. Honest work, but it wasn't going anywhere. He was frustrated because he felt like he'd done everything right and still wasn't getting traction. One day he watched the operations manager dealing with a mess. Shipments delayed, inventory wrong, customers angry. The manager looked like he was drowning. That moment was the turning point. The guy didn't just complain about the chaos. He asked a question that changed his life. What skill would make me useful when things are messy? He started learning how the system worked. Not vaguely, specifically. He learned the software they used. He learned the process behind scheduling. He learned the math behind inventory. He didn't wait to be promoted to start acting like a leader. He started improving little things without asking for permission. He wrote clearer handoff notes. He created a simple checklist that reduced errors. He tracked issues and brought solutions, not complaints. Within a year, he wasn't just another employee. He was someone who made the place run better. And here's the part that matters. When he asked for a raise, it wasn't a plea. It was a business conversation. He could point to what he improved. He could show what it saved. He could show how it reduced problems. He had leverage because he built value. That's how adults win. Not by hoping someone notices, but by becoming undeniable. Successful people realize early that being nice is not a career strategy. Being hardworking by itself is not a career strategy. Being loyal by itself is not a career strategy. Those are good traits, but they don't replace skill. The marketplace pays for outcomes, so you build outcomes by building ability. Now, skill doesn't only mean technical skills, it also means the skills that multiply everything else. Communication, negotiation, focus, emotional control, follow through, leadership, the ability to learn fast, the ability to teach others, the ability to write clearly. the ability to sell your ideas without begging. In America, there's a myth that talent is what separates people. It's comforting because it excuses you. If someone is ahead, you can tell yourself they were born with something you don't have. Successful people realize early that talent is overrated compared to deliberate practice. They become students of improvement. They don't just do the job. They train for the job. Think about an athlete. They don't just show up on game day and hope it goes well. They watch film. They run drills. They repeat fundamentals until they can do them under pressure. They treat practice like the real arena because they know the game exposes what you trained, not what you intended. Your career and your life are the same. Pressure reveals your preparation. When deadlines hit, when money gets tight, when conflict shows up, when a door opens, you don't rise to your hopes. You fall to your habits. So successful people build habits that make them steady. Here's a metaphor that will keep you honest. Imagine your current skill set is a tool belt. If the tool belt is empty, every problem becomes a crisis. If the tool belt is full, problems become tasks. Same world, different capability. One person panics, the other person handles it. Now let's talk about the difference between learning and collecting information because most people confuse the two. Collecting information feels productive. Watching videos, listening to podcasts, scrolling tips, saving posts. It feels like you're doing something. But learning is proved through application. If you're not practicing, you're not learning. You're entertaining yourself with the idea of growth. Successful people realize early that practice is the price. You don't get to skip it. You can't read your way into confidence. You can't watch your way into mastery. You have to do the reps. You have to be willing to be bad long enough to get good. There's a woman in Chicago who wanted to move into a higher paying role but felt stuck. She worked in an admin job and kept saying she wasn't techie. She told herself she wasn't the type who could do more. Then she got tired of hearing her own excuses. She didn't quit her job. She didn't gamble. She started building skill at night, not a fantasy plan, a real plan, 30 minutes after dinner, 4 nights a week. She learned basic spreadsheets, then advanced spreadsheets. She learned how to present information clearly. She practiced writing emails that were concise and confident. She built a small portfolio of projects based on real business problems. She didn't wait for permission to grow. She grew first, then she applied. When she interviewed for a better role, she didn't talk about how motivated she was. She showed what she could do. She walked them through a dashboard she built. She explained how it could save time and reduce mistakes. She spoke like someone who already belonged in the room. She didn't fake confidence. She earned it. That is a pattern you can copy. Build skill quietly. Build proof. Then move. Another thing successful people realize early is that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's being willing to be coached. The fastest way to level up is feedback, but most people avoid feedback because it threatens their ego. They want to be seen as competent more than they want to become competent. So they hide. They avoid challenges. They stay in the comfort zone where they can't fail and they also can't grow. Successful people take feedback like medicine. Sometimes it tastes bitter, but it works. They ask for it. They seek mentors. They watch people who are better and study what they do. They don't get offended when corrected. They get grateful because correction saves time. And they understand something else. Your reputation is a form of wealth. If people trust you, opportunities show up faster. If people don't, your life becomes harder than it needs to be. Reputation is built through small, consistent behaviors. Being on time, doing what you say, communicating early when there's a problem, taking responsibility when you mess up, delivering quality even when no one is watching. Those habits are not just moral, they are strategic. Now let's make this practical so it doesn't stay inspirational. Here is how you apply this immediately. You pick a skill that increases your value in the next 12 months, not a random skill, a skill that fits your direction. If you're in business, maybe it's sales, project management, analytics, writing, negotiation. If you're in a trade, maybe it's certification, troubleshooting, advanced technique, estimating, customer communication. If you're aiming for leadership, it's people management, conflict resolution, decision-making, and clear communication. Then you build a practice schedule that is small enough to survive real life. You don't need a 2-hour routine that collapses after a week. You need consistency. 20 minutes a day beats 2 hours once a week. One focused hour 4 times a week changes your trajectory. The key is you show up even when you're tired. You keep the chain alive because you're building identity. Then you apply what you learn immediately. Build something, fix something, improve something. Volunteer for a project that stretches you. Offer to solve a problem no one wants to touch. Do the work that makes you useful. Useful people have options. Options create freedom. And you track your progress in a way that keeps you honest, not with perfection, with proof. What can you do now that you couldn't do 3 months ago? What results can you point to? What problems can you solve faster? What outcomes can you produce? This is how you stop feeling stuck. You don't think your way out. You skill your way out. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Now sit with this and let it challenge you. What skill, if you built it with discipline, would raise your income and your confidence within a year? Where have you been consuming information instead of practicing and producing proof? Who could you learn from if you stopped protecting your ego and started seeking feedback? And if you decided, starting today, to become so valuable you can't be ignored, what doors would open in your life that you currently think are locked? Chapter 6. Make your life a decision you've walked through the realities that change people for good. You faced the truth that time is always being spent. You took ownership instead of blame. You committed to the long game. You reshaped the influence around you. And you started building portable value through skill and proof. None of that works if it stays as information. This final chapter is where you turn the message into movement, and you stop treating your life like something that happens to you. Successful people realize early that clarity is a choice, not a gift. Most people wait for clarity like it's going to arrive in a lightning bolt. They want certainty before they move, but certainty is not the entry fee. Action is. When you start moving with discipline, your next steps reveal themselves. When you don't move, your mind fills the space with fear, doubt, and stories that keep you safe but small. Think about how many Americans live their lives on autopilot. They do what's expected. They do what's familiar. They do what keeps the peace. They do what gets likes. They do what numbs the stress. And then they wonder why they feel restless. That restlessness is not a flaw. It's your life asking you to step up. It's a signal that you were built for more than routine without direction. The successful person doesn't wait for the world to hand them a purpose. They build purpose by choosing what matters and aligning their habits with it. They decide what their life is for, then they shape their days around that decision. Not perfectly, consistently. Here's what most people don't understand until it's late. Your life is already a decision. If you don't decide, you still decide. You decide to drift. You decide to let your environment, your past, your fears, and other people's expectations write your story. That is still a choice, just one you didn't own. So in this last chapter, I want you to take the steering wheel with both hands. There's a moment that comes for everyone, usually in a quiet place, not in a dramatic scene. It's the moment you realize you can keep doing what you've been doing and the results will keep being what they've been. That moment can scare you or it can wake you up. Successful people take it as a wake-up call. They don't just feel motivated for a weekend. They change their standards. Standards are the real foundation, not goals. Goals are useful, but they're optional if you don't have standards. Standards are what you do even when life is messy. Standards are what you protect. Standards are what you refuse to negotiate with yourself about. You've already heard about keeping small promises to yourself and building identity through consistency. Now we bring it together. The person you become over the next year will be shaped by what you tolerate, what you repeat, and what you choose when no one is watching. If you want to be someone who wins long-term, you need a personal code, not a complicated philosophy. A code that fits in your head and shows up in your calendar. It sounds like this. I do what I said I would do. I don't lie to myself. I handle what's mine to handle. I play the long game. I protect my focus. I choose my circle with intention. I build my skills. I reroute fast when I slip. I don't need perfect conditions to act with discipline. That code doesn't make life easy. It makes life stable. And stability is what allows greatness to grow. Now let's talk about fear, because fear is what blocks people right at the moment they could change everything. Fear isn't just fear of failure. A lot of people can handle failure. They fail all the time. What they can't handle is the vulnerability of trying sincerely. If you try sincerely and it doesn't work, you have to face yourself. It's easier to half try and keep an excuse in your pocket. It's easier to say, I could have done it if I really wanted to, than to find out what happens when you actually give your best. Successful people realize early that you don't get to keep your ego and keep your growth. One of them has to lose. They choose growth. They also realize that fear is often a signal, not a stop sign. Fear shows up when something matters. Fear shows up when you're stepping into a bigger identity. Fear shows up when you're about to leave the version of yourself that was built to survive instead of thrive. So they don't ask, how do I get rid of fear? They ask, how do I act with fear in the passenger seat while I drive anyway? That's courage, not the absence of fear, the refusal to obey it. And here's the truth you need to hear in this last chapter. You don't need more confidence. You need more evidence. Evidence comes from reps. Evidence comes from days where you didn't feel like it and you did it anyway. Evidence comes from decisions you didn't want to make that protected your future. Confidence is a byproduct of keeping your word and building proof. So what does it look like to make your life a decision? It starts with deciding what you're no longer available for. You're no longer available for drifting. You're no longer available for self-betrayal. You're no longer available for habits that steal your future and call it normal. You're no longer available for circles that mock growth. You're no longer available for excuses that sound smart but keep you stuck. Then you decide what you are available for. You're available for the work. You're available for structure. You're available for learning. You're available for discomfort that produces strength. You're available for building skill. You're available for honest conversations. You're available for protecting your mornings, your health, your finances, and your focus. This is where people usually ask for a big plan, but the big plan isn't what changes you. The daily standard changes you. The daily standard is what makes the big plan real. So here's the standard you carry forward from everything you've heard. Each day, you choose one outcome that moves your life forward and you protect time for it. You keep one small promise that reinforces your identity. You make one decision that plays the long game. You remove one distraction that steals your attention. You do one act of ownership instead of blame. You do one rep of skill building that makes you more valuable. And you communicate one truth, even if it's uncomfortable, because honesty is part of discipline. That's not a checklist to impress yourself. It's a way to live like you mean it. And when you have a day where you slip, you don't spiral. You don't turn it into a character assassination. You reroute fast. You remind yourself you're not building a perfect streak. You're building a life. Now let me give you the outro you actually need, the one that doesn't just sound good but holds you accountable. You are not short on potential. You are short on decisions you're willing to honor. That's it. Your future is not waiting for you to feel ready. Your future is waiting for you to act like the person you say you want to be. There are two versions of you listening right now. One version wants this. The other version wants comfort. And comfort will always have a convincing argument. Comfort will tell you to start next week. Comfort will tell you to take it easy because you've had a hard day. Comfort will tell you that you deserve a break, even when you've been breaking your promises for years. Comfort is persuasive. Comfort is patient. Comfort will ruin your life slowly and politely. But the version of you that wants this, the version of you that's tired of drifting, the version of you that's ready to respect your time and your standards, that version of you can take control today. Not with a dramatic announcement, with a decision you keep. Decisions create identity. Identity creates behavior. Behavior creates results. Results create confidence. Confidence creates momentum. Momentum changes your life. So here's your call to action right now in real life. Choose the one commitment you will not negotiate with yourself about for the next 30 days. Choose the one skill you will practice until you have proof. Choose the one boundary you will set to protect your focus. Choose the one person, group, or environment that will sharpen you and move closer to it. Choose the one distraction you will remove because it's been stealing your future. Then choose to show up tomorrow like your life depends on it, because it does. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. And now, as this final chapter closes, let the questions land where they need to land. If you keep living the way you've been living, what does your life look like 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What are you tolerating that is quietly costing you your future? What promise to yourself would change your self-respect immediately if you kept it starting tonight? Who do you need to become so your opportunities match your ambition? And if you decided today to stop drifting and start living on purpose, what would be the first disciplined step you take before the day ends?